Alright, I'm Nick Purler, and we run Purler Wrestling Academy and Foundation Wrestling, which is our video system that sells all over the United States. We're going to give a couple of video clips here real quick of what we're all about, what our camps, Wrestling Academy, and weekend workshops and things provide, as well as a couple of technical tips so that you have an idea of what goes on in our practices. We like to say that we help teach the kids how to wrestle, not just a bunch of moves. I started in 1999 and moved from Texas to Missouri, started our Wrestling Academy. It pretty much blew up, and within 7 months I was able to retire from teaching and do this full time, and that's what I've been doing since the year 2000. And what we'll cover is, we basically break wrestling down into 4 areas. We cover a lot about the mental side of wrestling, the positioning side of wrestling, the hand fighting. We got to use our hands when we wrestle, and technique as well. And from the technical side of wrestling, we focus around the common positions. For example, you're going to get maybe 4 front headlocks a match, like it or not. And you have 45 matches this year. That's quite a few front headlocks you're going to have. Another common position. I stand up, my opponent has his hands locked behind me. I've got to get away. You're going to stand up 3, 4, 5 times a match times 45 matches. You know, it's easily 150 times this year. You'll be in that position as well. There's about 6 positions that are very common to every wrestling match, whether you're 6 years old or 30 years old. So we focus around those technical areas of wrestling and cover the core, I would say 3 or 4 techniques from each common position. That makes up the foundation of techniques that we cover. We also spend a lot of time developing certain things like positioning and your attitude, because these are the areas that basically mold you into a wrestler, and that's what we focus on as far as teaching how to wrestle, rather than just a bunch of moves. So a couple things we do cover for the attitude side of wrestling. Kind of the main focus, I would say, that a lot of us, you know, we make a mistake is, number one, we don't focus so much just on winning and losing, but how we win and lose. For example, if you're a second-year wrestler and you got to wrestle a guy that's ranked in the nation, you're probably not going to win. So is your goal to win the match? Yes, but it may be a year or 2 before you're ready to beat someone like that. So we tell our students and kids that come to our camp and workshops and that type of thing to be realistic with the goals you set. So my goal may be to have an 8-point match with them. And if I do that, then I win. You know, in track and field, I can get 10th place in the meet, but if I ran faster than I've ever ran before, I have success. In wrestling, you're either a winner or a loser. So we cover these types of things in our practices so that we mold their minds and teach them how to deal with the pressures of wrestling. And another thing that we cover quite a bit is to teach them to show up to compete or to win. And keep in mind that winning may be having an 8-point match, right? So, you know, we always say that there's a difference between showing up to wrestle and showing up to win. Everybody shows up to wrestle. One guy shows up to win, or shows up to accomplish his goal for that match. And that's why, you know, I get pretty excited when we get, you know, I get thousands of emails and calls a year for our camps and DVDs and Wrestling Academy. And when people who are complete strangers say, you know, I noticed your students, they just act different than the other kids. They're very competitive. Those are the things that I like to hear from people who are considering coming to our camps or joining our wrestling academies that me and my brother run throughout the Midwest, because that shows that we're doing our job. You know, we want our 12-year-olds to be more competitive than the 18-year-old, and our 7-year-olds are more competitive than the 12-year-old, and on up the line. So those are some of the things we cover. Now, as far as positioning, if I'm going to fight Nick, I need to be in good position whenever we're doing battle. All right, so basically we teach mostly a deep European wrestling stance where you're blocking with your head and your chest. We basically have 3 lines of defense. You have your head, your hands and arms, and your hips. My number 1 defense is my head. My strongest defense is my hips. So we're fighting from here. I basically say feet wide, touch the mat, don't let them read your shirt. We wrestle here. We roll our eyes in back of our head. We bend over at the waist, and we wrestle hairline to hairline. So if me and Nick are in here fighting, this is where we're going to be at. Now, people will say, well, if you bent over, can't he snap your head down? Yes, but if I'm in more of a trophy stance, he can hit me with 16 different takedowns, so I'd rather get hit in the head a couple of times than taken down 40 times a season. And keep in mind, if he does snap your head down, I'd have a good kind of a post leg here. If he pushes me backwards, I have a post leg here. So if he does snap my head, I just take a step in and grab this elbow. So I'm not too concerned about that. Besides, if Nick was in a squared stance and I snap his head down, his hands hit easy and I can push him and he falls back because he doesn't have his front and back stabilizers from this stance. So we call it an intact stance, and this is our positioning whenever we're fighting most of the time. Now, we do have a squared stance. The only time we get in our squared stance is whenever we're going to circle on our opponent to get that angle. Then we're back into our attack stance. Now, your positioning, this is key. Positioning does 3 things in a wrestling match. Number 1, it makes you faster. Number 2, it makes you stronger. And number 3, it limits what your opponent can do to you. So here's an example. If I am in track and field and I'm starting like this, and my opponents are down here, they're going to be faster than I am because they're already kind of in the starting blocks. Same way with wrestling. If I'm kind of up here in kind of a halfway wrestling stance, I'm not going to be very quick. But if I'm here and stand up a little bit, grab my elbow. Good. Here, and that leg steps forward, I'm ready to go. Or if I'm down low, here, I'm ready to attack. So at a moment's notice, I'm ready to go. All right? And we teach our guys to basically be able to almost pinch your hand between your hip and your thigh. All right? We're not going to wrestle down compact, but we're pretty close. I like to use the analogy of a snake. A snake isn't dangerous when he's laying out on the ground. He's dangerous when he's coiled up. So he's not always coiled up like this, ready to strike. He's relaxed, but he's close. So for me, I'm not dangerous when I'm wrestling here. I'm only dangerous when I'm coiled up. All right? And that's what makes you quicker. Now, positioning also makes you stronger. For example, if I was going to squat weight in the weight room and I have my feet close together and I'm looking at the ground, I can't squat much weight. I can probably realistically triple my strength. If my feet are wide and my head's up and I can squat like this, now I can lift, say, 3 times more weight. You say, wow, you can get 3 times stronger without even lifting weights? Yeah, it's all position. So same thing in wrestling. Whether you're on your back, you're pinning somebody, top or bottom, and on a single leg, you have a front headlock. You want to have good positioning from all these positions and core areas of wrestling. We spend a lot of time for that as well. So positioning on your feet makes you faster and stronger and limits what your opponent can do to you. Now, as far as limiting what he can do to me, I don't want to be a big target. So I would say this. Who would you rather wrestle in a wrestling tournament? Would you rather wrestle this guy here, or would you rather wrestle this guy? Probably him, because there's more openings. So you don't want to be a big target. You know, if the basketball goal was that big around, you know, even I would be good at basketball. But it's not. Same way in wrestling. If your stance is open and you're a big target, you're going to be easier to wrestle against. So you want to close up your stance because that limits what your opponent can do to you. So your positioning in all these areas of wrestling makes you faster, stronger, and limits what your opponent can do to you. So that's kind of the basics of positioning, and that's going to help you probably more than just piling more and more wrestling moves on top of your wrestling repertoire.